and welcome to Cookie Pocket, episode 101. This is the final episode proper of season 4, but we will be returning next week for kind of a brief wrap-up on the full season, but this is the last full film episode that we will be hosting this season. Today, I, Zach, am joined by my usual co-hosts, Christian and Mitchell, but as has been the case in many episodes this season, especially episodes that I host, we have a guest. Sir, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Tyler Albizo, a film lover, I guess, hopeful film, I've made some short films, friend, colleague, former fellow student of, we went to the same school, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Student adjacent.
Yeah, student adjacent. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. And Tyler is going to be here today for our discussion of true stories. Up until a couple years ago, I feel like this was kind of a forgotten film, and then it kind of had a bit of a cult resurgence. But this is David Byrne of Talking Heads' directorial debut. It might be his only film, although I'm not entirely positive of that. Okay, it is. All right. Thank you, Tyler. Already coming in handy. His directorial debut and only film, subtitled True Stories, a film about a bunch of people in Virgil, Texas. And true to that title, it is a film about a bunch of idiosyncratic individuals who live in a small town in Texas that's built around a microprocessor plant. And it's kind of just about the traditions that these people have and the ways that they interact with each other in the lead up to their big celebration of, is it the 100th anniversary of Texas? I forget the exact numbering.
150th?
150th anniversary of Texas becoming a state. So it's a very quote unquote indie synopsis and idea for a film, and it's portrayed through the typical oddball lens that David Byrne brings to both his music and, it turns out, his film work as well. But I feel like we've had enough beating around the bush. Let's start, as we always do, with overall thoughts. What did you guys generally think of True Stories?
Well, I feel like it often falls to me to jump in first when Zach is hosting, so I'll do it again.
Yeah. Come on.
This was my second experience with True Stories. I sort of sought it out because I wanted to see it, and I think maybe some people at school had seen it and were excited about it, or maybe I just saw the average rating on Letterboxd and thought, oh, that's higher than most things. I'll watch it now. But I'm not really a Talking Heads fan by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not super well acquainted with Byrne and anything else he's done either. But I enjoyed this. I like it. I gave it a solid 3 out of 5. And I think my favorite thing about it is John Goodman. I think this is kind of like making of a true star here, but in a much more like personable, digestible, real sense than you would often conceive of a movie star, at least in my head. So I enjoyed that. I think the first 20-ish minutes or so of True Stories is my favorite bit of True Stories, which kind of works against it. I like the Byrne just like driving around making his observations, and I have plenty of like nasal exhalations and even the occasional laughter during that, so that's nice. And John Goodman's whole thing about wanting to get married and believing in the institution of matrimony is wholesome and fun, I think. So and I really like the first song, which I assume is titled Wildlife. It's a total earworm. Will be stuck in my head for the next few days, but that's fine by me. Yeah, it's very solid. I kind of wish I got the Criterion restoration so that I could see more pixels and also have the CD, but I didn't. I rented it in 480p digitally, so alas, pity me. In my first review, I said I was wary of the restoration because I liked that the the less high def version felt like a MTV sort of thing. But this time around, no, I would have just liked to seen it a little bit more, I think. But yeah, a good fun time, if occasionally a little meandering and disinteresting to me.
Go ahead, Tyler. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I came about this film because one, Talking Heads is actually my favorite band. Big fan. And yeah, I think I just heard people talking about it, and then knowing it was the kind of companion film to the album True Stories, and seeing some of the images from it, I was like, I gotta see this. I did buy the Criterion Blu-ray, and
Nice.
a few years ago. And yeah, so this is was my like second time watching it. And yeah, I love this movie. It's beautifully shot, like especially the beginning, just like the opening thing of the girl walking. I'm just like, oh God, so much of the like landscape shots and skylines and these little like tableaus are just like so incredibly done. Really visually interesting film. And yeah, very funny. Just has that David Byrne idiosyncratic uh, comedy in it where just the way he talks, the way everything is, you can tell how detailed every aspect is of just like um, what everyone is doing. And you can tell it comes from a single person's mind, which I always love in film. And uh, just great aspects in all filmmaking, production design, cinematography, acting. Uh, it's a great film.
Yeah, I like this a lot more than I thought I would. I haven't been like a massive fan of the Talking Heads, but like I don't know. I've heard Psycho Killer like 50 million times.
yeah.
And which is a great song, by the way. And then Love for Sale, I've seen the music video a few times, so that was interesting to have that as like a major aspect of one of the scenes of the film. I think I guess the experimentation in general is kind of what got me interested. The fact that this came out like before Napoleon Dynamite, and it has a lot of like the Raising Arizona cliches with the South mixed in there. And then mixed with kind of like what Christian mentioned in his review, like the MTV era stuff. So it's interesting. I think I was really bothered at first that there wouldn't be, and I was very concerned that there wouldn't be like an overarching plot. It would kind of just be like things happening. And I guess, I don't know, for some reason it worked for me. I guess like the level of experimentation went in so many different directions, and not to mention like the convincing characters, I guess, and how satirical the characters are. All of the characters really were memorable for me. Honestly, I wouldn't have remembered Pop Staples that much if they hadn't have like the whole like I don't know, like the religious premonition thing, plus with like the dancing in the circle and stuff. That was like my least favorite scene, just because of how long it dragged on. And I guess the last act in general really felt like a limited pace, like compared to the rest of the film. It felt like we were kind of building towards the talent show and the parade and everything. And I guess like the sidebar plot with John Goodman's character only really comes in towards the end. And I also feel like that kind of hurts the spontaneity of everything. It's trying to add consistency where it doesn't really belong, I guess, which is very contrary to what I'd normally say. But I think for this film, with how much experimentation there is and how much, like, I guess with the narration, with Byrne himself, and like Tyler mentioned, with the random like landscape shots that are really well done, and like the still frames and like the riding shots of the buildings and the homes and everything. I just thought there was so much variety, I guess, in the cinematography and the character designs, that it was easy for me to keep like holding on, especially for the fact that it was only 90 minutes. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Like, I definitely think that there's a missing momentum when it comes to stuff, and I do feel like the more you like Talking Heads, the more you're going to like the movie anyway.
Okay.
But overall, I was very intrigued by how experimental it was, and how many liberties were taken to make the film that he really wanted to make. And it definitely felt like a creatively free film, which is something to appreciate.
Okay. So I gave this film a 3 out of 5, but I don't think that's. I don't necessarily think that's because I hold anything against the movie. I just think it's a really solid, good film. And I think maybe I appreciate it more as kind of a work of art than I do as a film. Like, I enjoy this movie in the way that I enjoy, like, an installation at the Hirshhorn or something like that, where I'm in the moment kind of thinking about it and enjoying it, rather than sitting in it expecting to be entertained as if I'm watching a movie, even though I am. Earlier this season, when we talked about The Room on the Weekend Review, which is a segment that we usually do on our non-guested episodes of this show, I said that, like it or not, The Room is a piece of art, and Tommy Wiseau is an artist because The Room is a true representation of his feelings and opinions on the world, and that's what art should do. And for the same reason, although with a better outcome here, I think True Stories is a very true work of art. It's an entirely unfiltered representation of the things that David Byrne finds interesting about people and America and small towns and the world, and why he finds them interesting. And there's so many things in this that have such focus placed upon them in like little lines of dialogue that don't even feel like they're necessarily meant to be a joke, but they feel just like, oh, that's how David Byrne thinks of this thing. Like when he's talking about the microprocessor plant, and he describes it as being a cool multi-purpose shape, a box. And from anybody else, I would think a multi-purpose shape, but from David Byrne, I totally believe that that's how he thinks of a box. It's a cool multi-purpose shape. And I love that. And I love all the little details in this because they feel so true to what he believes and what he thinks about the world. But mentioning that same line, the original tagline for this movie kind of worked off of that line, and called this a cool multi-purpose movie. So in that vein, I wanted to ask you guys, what are some of the purposes of this movie? Anyone can begin.
Oh, gosh darn it. Okay. Well, I guess the tagline is the most like literal recognition of what it is it aims to do and portraying. I forget exactly how it's worded. The subtitle of the people
a bunch
in
of
Texas.
People in Virgil, Texas. Yeah.
Yes, a bunch of people. I hate to be negative because I do mostly like this, but I think it somewhat does not deliver on that aspect as the runtime continues, just because I feel like every like subsequent person we meet that's at the forefront of a musical sequence or something becomes like more idiosyncratic and less like somebody in the bunch of people living in Virgil, Texas. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's I don't know, maybe that reflects negatively on me and my perception of the variety of people in Virgil, Texas. But I am more of a fan of the scenes in the multipurpose box, if you will, where the workers are chatting with each other, and there's like a diversity in conversation and background, and you know, and I prefer that they still feel like people, and sometimes it feels like they're not as much that, like the woman that's just sits in her bed all day because she can, but I guess another positive example would be I like the pathological liar that John Goodman goes on a date with. I think she's great, but other purposes beyond that, I don't know. I guess put some really cool images to some good music. I think it delivers on that. So, that's commendable and doesn't need to always be bound to the story or the people of Virgil, Texas, or what have you. I'm always down for a spontaneous music, song or dance thing, and wildlife. I love how there's this like constant stream of people approaching the microphone, and I think that really delivers on this sort of literal thesis of the film being about a bunch of people and how we all sort of share in this wild life.
That was a good ending.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like in the aspect of showing a bunch of people in Virgil, Texas, it is from like an outsider's perspective, like David Byrne looking in and seeing these kind of all these weird stories, but not kind of not judging them as being these freaks. They're like, it's just like, oh, this is the Bachelor for sale. Uh, this is the pathological liar, but not necessarily like it's not making fun of them. It's just kind of presenting them as they are, and also not getting too deep into like none of them have problems that are like really dramatic and like they're not going on this kind of journey within themselves. They're just kind of this is just who I am. John Goodman's really the only one where he kind of has this quest of like trying to find a life partner, which he kind of achieves in the end. But it almost like it's interesting the ending of him marrying the woman in the bed. I'm almost like, is that like a happy ending? But now it's like he's the dancing bear, and now he's stuck in bed for the rest of his life.
I did find myself thinking that as well. Where it doesn't happen in the close-up where they kiss, but in the wide shot, he almost seems to be a little exasperated with having to be in bed and having all these people around asking all these questions. And so I do think maybe there's an element of like, maybe being alone was kind of nice sometimes, but... Mitchell, you're up.
I mean, music videos, Virgil, Texas, hyper consumerism.
There you
go. Finding spontaneity in your mundane life.
Well, if you don't mind me,
those are my purposes, Zach.
If you don't mind me jumping off those points, though, I
Go
do
ahead.
think
Leap.
I do think you've kind of hit on something I wanted to comment on, which was that I don't think multi-purpose necessarily has to mean anything all that deep. I think perhaps, and that's not even to say that David Byrne came up with the tagline, because I'm sure the tagline, it's quite possible the tagline was just come up with by whoever had to make the poster, and they went, that's a line from the movie. But if a multi-purpose movie was something that David Byrne did set out to make, I don't think the purposes have to be that deep. I think multi-purpose could just mean it's a movie, and there are also songs, and at the end there's a big emotive ending, and it might tell you some things about your own life too. And there's our four purposes. Like, I think it could be that simplistic. But I do think, Tyler, you hit upon a good point of kind of the lack of judgment and the very kind of flat presentation of just, this is a bunch of people and these are their lives. Because I was reading up on kind of the origins of this story, and apparently David Byrne, while on tour, collected a bunch of like tabloid clippings and newspaper clippings of these radical stories. Woman pathologically lies about dating JFK. Single man places ad on television for wife. And his kind of concept for the movie was, well, what if all of these were true? But not true in like a scandalous way, where they were things that people wanted to talk about, but just kind of true in like a matter of fact, oh yeah, that's the dancing bear. He has his ads on TV every week that he wants to get a wife. And they were just something that everybody accepted, including him as the filmmaker and sort of the narrator and viewer within the film itself. And I think that's a really interesting angle. And the script was also apparently totally written by him. The credited writers are him, Stephen Tobolowsky, also known as Ned Ryerson from Groundhog Day, and Beth Henley, I think. though I might have that name wrong. But apparently they just wrote like a draft, and then David Byrne changed everything and asked that they keep their names on it, so it didn't look like he did everything himself. But it still does very much feel like he kind of did everything himself, because this is entirely Byrne. Christian, you've mentioned wildlife a few times. I think we've all talked about the songs a little bit. So I want to pose that as a topic of full conversation. This is a movie, but it's also a jukebox musical of sorts, based around songs from the Talking Heads album, True Stories, which personally is my favorite Talking Heads album. I don't necessarily think it's the best one, but it is my favorite. So what did you guys think of the songs, outside of those that maybe you've already had a chance to mention?
Well, I don't know any of the other titles, so forgive me. But I like the one where the kids are wearing the green shirts and banging on sticks and whatnot, and just like tromping around, like doing their thing. That had a wonderful energy to it, and was another like wholly successful instance of just people being people, I think, because we've all seen, I think literally everyone has seen like kids of all ages just like doing the kid thing and like doing their funny little walks and being like, I want the thing, and just existing in the most erratic way. And I think it's really fortunate that this, even in this small sense, that the film doesn't focus wholly on adults, because that could have been an easy oversight, or like basing it around the newspaper clippings or whatever. Maybe even a logical way to go about doing this, making it about adult life. But no, it's about a broader scheme of things. So I enjoyed that. I also liked Goodman's big finale sing along, where he
People
gets
Like
his
Us.
mojo back.
Yeah.
Yes, that one is just splendid. So and no, I don't think any of them are bad or out of place. I think and I think the sort of like eccentricities of them, both from a production standpoint and from like a chord progression standpoint, makes all of them very fresh, and definitely reflects positively upon like re-listens and rewatches. So that's always a sign of quality.
Nice.
Yeah. I love John Goodman's performance is great. It's interesting, like having listened to the regular album and watching the movie, and it's like, which versions do you prefer? I think most of the time I like the Talking Heads versions more, but I really like the Radiohead version done in the movie. Which, fun fact, that is where the band Radiohead got their name from, was that song.
Wow.
So it's an interesting little tidbit for this movie. And Dream Operator's one of my favorite songs of that album. I definitely like the album version more, just because I feel like the actress is not like an amazing singer. And yeah, I feel like John Goodman is just so electric in everything that it's like he's just gonna hit anything out of the park.
Yeah, I think the way that like Puzzle and Evidence was introduced was like the most subtle, I guess you could say, which is kind of like like what's subtle about this movie, really. Everything's just so crazy in your face, but I liked how that was introduced and how that was like kind of directly addressing the satire the most, I guess, besides maybe the Love for Sale music video, which is probably my favorite song in the whole film. And then Wild Wild Life. Sorry. I was very surprised. Like that's like the first introduction where it's like this is like a jukebox musical, like Zach said. So I thought that was a good like setting the stage, no pun intended, like setting the stage with all the actors, and it kind of gets you hyped and like gives you an idea of what the rest of the film's going to be like when it comes to music. So everything else, I mean, I wasn't like a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of John Goodman. Tyler, in case you didn't know, I am ruining my reputation. I'm sorry.
Oh my god.
You should have heard me during Barbie. I was like hating on half the cast. I'm an awful person, but not a huge fan of his singing, but I do like I like the song, and I like the subplot in general on its own, and I mean, I don't think there's a problem as a sidebar. I don't think there's an inherent issue at all with having a lot of the film kind of around these music videos, or like around these like the zaniness and like a lot of the themes that go along with Talking Heads songs and music videos being such an integral part of the movie. And I think that that was what was most surprising to me, and that's why I think I like the song so much, because they could come one after another and you'd still get like the idea of what was happening, and still relate to the film.
Okay. So, Mitchell, since you mentioned a few things about the musical numbers that maybe didn't work for you as much, Christian, Tyler, any songs that for you guys just felt like duds, or don't feel like they're incorporated into the film as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, like there's ones where it's like I didn't think I love the song Dream Operator, but I didn't love the performance of the woman, but it's like during the fashion show, so you're not thinking as much about it. I was gonna say I forgot about Puzzling Evidence, which I do love that performance of it, and that one feels a lot like something that would be in the middle of a musical, just kind of like a fun little song that's like, it's like, oh, it's one of the side characters that's doing a thing. And I love that whole sequence with just all the conspiracy stuff. It's great.
It even had its own title card.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I was bothered by it by any. I guess what Mitchell said about the like sermon kind of that scene going on a while. I guess maybe I felt that, but no, I don't think any of the songs are bad or out of place really.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I think, especially towards the ending, I think the songs really kind of make the whole movie for me. I at least considered incorporating this into my Letterboxd review if I didn't actually write it in there. But I compared this film to Nashville, Robert Altman's Nashville, where Nashville is a much longer movie. But I spent a lot of Nashville thinking, is it still going, really? And I enjoyed individual scenes in and of themselves, but as it kept going, I thought, oh, I gotta go to bed. And then the ending hit, and Nashville, similarly but not identically, ends with a big concert and a big musical performance, and it made the whole movie for me. And for that film, it made it a 5 out of 5 because it made everything else throughout the whole movie work for me. This film, the ending doesn't quite do that, but seeing John Goodman up there performing People Like Us really, I think, makes his whole arc work, and kind of ties together a lot of the preceding 90 minutes. And usually when you say that the credits were your favorite part of the movie, it's an insult. But City of Dreams is my favorite Talking Heads song. And I think just that visual of the little girl from the beginning of the film, which at the beginning of the film, you hear kind of a motif from City of Dreams, just instrumentally. And then at the end, they bring the song in as she's playing down the road. And I think that song, more than any other, really encapsulates kind of the whole meaning and theme of the movie, or at least what David Byrne finds important about the movie and the story that he's tried to tell. And I find that really powerful, just seeing her walk down the road. And that was also a shot, because I think I rented the same SD copy that you did, Christian. That was one where I was like, I wonder how well you can see her in like a proper HD copy. Because on the SD copy on Amazon that at least I rented, she gets about halfway down the road, and then for like half of the credits, she's just kind of like a little white splotch in the distance. And I thought, I wonder if you can like see her in focus the whole time or something. But yeah, so the ending of this really, really brings everything together for me. And most of the musical numbers do work for me. Some of the concert, I think, kind of drags a little bit for me before John Goodman shows up. But even then, I think the visuals of that kind of number really pull it together, for me at least. Where I love seeing the woman who's the pad of butter, who's clearly just having the time of her life, like moving in and then going out again, and moving in and then going out again. But Love for Sale, I like how it's incorporated. I like how it's performed, because the actual version of the song here is pretty much just the version from the album. But I dislike the decision to have the woman in bed like speaking over the whole song. That does bug me a little bit.
Yeah.
Just saying like
me
random
too.
stuff like hot
Yeah,
diggity.
I think they're selling something, I dig it, that kind of thing. Where at some point it kind of just feels like, all right, if we're going to do this, can we like see her say these things instead of just hearing them in the background the whole time? But yeah, for the most part, I think the album kind of, I mean, it's not literally the movie, because there was a separate album released that was actually the cast recordings from this movie. But I do think the album True Stories and the film True Stories are working towards very similar purposes and are kind of directed at the same thing and built around the same story. And so none of the songs feel crowbarred or kind of poorly inserted, because they've kind of been built around the same idea and the same purpose. And that, I think, makes it all really work. Okay, so for my third and final question here, I wanted to go back to Christian, your original Letterboxd review. In that review, you mention that this film kind of is like overwhelmingly quirky, which I think is something that a lot of casual viewers of the film might commiserate with. So I wanted to pose the question: do we think that this is a film that is deliberately trying to be quirky, deliberately trying to be funny and idiosyncratic and different? Or does it feel more genuine to you? Does it feel like this is just how David Byrne wanted to build it, and that's how it came out for him?
Well, I will say that it's both. I think that what you said about David Byrne's sincerity is probably mostly, if not entirely, true. And I think that the sincerity of his delivery of stuff like the multi-purpose shape or box, or however he says it, and then it's not exactly monotone, but the sort of like syllabic stress and like sing-songy way that he delivers his lines. And I don't think I would call any of it disingenuous, but there's always like artist's intention and where they're coming from is over here, and then like audience and where they receive it is over here, and there's always like space between. And sometimes this does not translate to that perfectly, even if Byrne knows or feels everything he's saying. And I still think that there's a little bit of quirk overload. Even saying that I like it in broad strokes, having given it a 3, enjoyed it enough to enjoy it on a rewatch, even though I had that quirk complaint the first time. And at this point, I would argue that I'm not a casual viewer, so maybe this complaint is not easily dismissed in such a manner, but it's more a matter of subjective taste, perhaps. I think probably a lot of people, even if they engage earnestly with this, it just might not be their thing, and that's the nature of engaging with any art created by an artist as unencumbered as David Byrne was when he made this. So maybe not as much a criticism as an observation or an honest appraisal of how I took it, but yes, it's sincere, and yes, it's excessively quirky at times.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, like, I think it is just the things that David Byrne is interested in and what he finds funny. I don't think he's, like, I don't think anyone could accuse him of being, like, I'm trying to be different. I'm like, he just is different. Like, you can just tell that by the art he makes. That, like, I think the way he talks in this movie is, like, just a little more accentuated version of the way he actually talks, where it's just like even more kind of simplified, of just like they're having a celebration of specialness, like just his like I'm hearing interviews with him like now, like he seems like a lot more just like aware of everything in the way he talks, but like I don't know if you've ever seen the for Stop Making Sense, he did this thing where he interviews himself in a bunch of where he's like one time he's like wearing different outfits where like, oh, he's dressed as a woman and he's like dressed thing, and he'll be like, where'd you get that big suit? And he's like, I like making my head look small. Getting a big suit makes my head look small. And he's just someone, I just love the way he talks. Like, it's just, and that's part of it, where it's like, if you're like aesthetics, or like if you're not interested in what he's interested in, you're gonna find this movie just like terrible, because there's like, it's just, do you have the same sense of humor and the same sensibilities? If you don't, then there's nothing for you, because there isn't much of a story besides kind of John Goodman finding love. There's just these interesting characters and interesting little idiosyncratic ideas, and it looks gorgeous.
Oh yeah,
but people don't care about that. So.
Yeah, I watched David Byrne's autocomplete on Wired, and he says to this day they cannot find the big suit, and that he wanted the suit to look more like an oversized baseball card or something, like something that didn't really make sense. And he said he didn't want it to look like a fat suit. He wanted it to be like, yeah,
just totally rectangular.
Yeah. Like Kanye Roblox.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I'm gonna have to just agree with what Tyler said. I said it was like a creative. It's pretty much just a big creative endeavor that happens to have fairly good production and pretty memorable shots, and like, it's not like a super compelling out of this world, like nobody's ever heard of like hyper consumerism, and then he's just like breaking the glass ceiling with freaking, this is what corporate America's like, or something. And there's nothing being taken seriously. Like it's just it's very interpretive, and yeah, I mean, I in terms of quirky stuff, I don't really, I don't know. I guess what Christian's analogy was with the hand gestures was the most compelling for me. I think
gestures that you as our listeners could not see.
Yes, because Christian was using gesticulation. Yeah, I think I never think there's something too quirky, I guess. I mean, when it comes to someone just being themselves, I guess is kind of what Zach and Tyler have been saying. And I think a lot of the quirkiness does come from the time period too. And I will add on, that's the end of that point, but I will say that, Zach, I watched the YouTube version of this that says it's standard, but it really is like, I think it's like 720, or I don't know if it is 1080 or not. So while you were asking, if you listeners could hear the clicking in the background, I was skimming through the last few seconds of the movie, and she is, based on the way the sun's hitting her dress, and like if I really like lean in, she's definitely like jumping a little bit and like moving like slightly side to side. So she is still moving, Zach. Yeah. She's still acting all the way down the road.
Okay.
And hopefully they recovered her okay. But
hopefully she didn't just keep walking, yes.
Right.
She's still walking to this day. We couldn't get her to stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a totally genuine movie. And I do think that for the most part, this is just, as Tyler pointed out, as we've all mentioned, this is kind of just the way that David Byrne sees the world. But I do think there's some winking to the camera here. I do think, I don't necessarily think that David Byrne is like totally lacking in self-awareness, that other people think that maybe the way that he presents himself is a little odd. And I think the wink to camera that kind of reveals that, and full disclosure, the main reason I have kind of like paid attention to this shot, and the reason I know about this entire film is I'm a big Red Letter Media fan, and they did not a video essay, but they have like a show called Review, which is kind of their more serious series where two of them just sit down and talk about a movie they like. And Josh and Jay talked about true stories, and they mentioned one of the shots at the beginning while he's driving the car. He just has the steering wheel like mount unlocked and is like pivoting it up and down in a way that would be extremely dangerous to do while actually driving a car. And his only acknowledgement of that is that he turns to camera and says, "Yep, real fancy driving." And that definitely feels like him. I mean, he literally does turn to camera, and he doesn't wink, but he does acknowledge kind of the oddity of that moment. So I do think there's certainly some self-awareness of the fact that this might be a strange film for some people, but David Byrne just doesn't care because this is the movie that he wants to make. And I'm glad that he got to make it. Apparently, the only reason he had pretty much total creative control over this, which is shocking to me because he was given the money to make this movie based off the success of Stop Making Sense, the concert film that he didn't direct. He just appeared in it as a member of the Talking Heads or of Talking Heads. But somehow that led to the deal and that led to the production of the film. And I am glad it did because I think this is a very special little movie. It's not necessarily the best movie. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but it is a very individual, personal little film, and I'm glad it exists. And that kind of covers all my overall questions. But is there anything that we didn't talk about that you guys wanted to mention? Any final thoughts we haven't covered yet?
I guess just like what was, because I think there's a lot of like moments that we haven't, like there's the Spalding Gray stuff where like
Right, yes.
both him going like his whole thing at the dinner table where he's like and then they come over from over here, they come over here, and we have all the different things, and he's another one where he just is this enigmatic personality and gives a great performance. I think a lot of the people, they brought in people they found interesting and were kind of like, go crazy, do whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I love the line that I think is kind of held true, where he's just like, there's no concept of weekends anymore. And it's like, yeah, for a lot of people, it's kind of true. Yeah, there's him. We mentioned the Lying Woman. She might be my favorite. She consistently was just hilarious. I think my favorite, maybe the hardest I laugh in the movie is when she's like, Mike Wallace wants my body.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love the Spalding Gray monologues, and I guess there's only two of them. But Spalding Gray is such he's a fantastic storyteller, where I think anything that he's talking about, it's like impossible not to listen to him. And often in a lot of his stage shows, he is talking about quite boring things. I've seen excerpts from one of his kind of live films where he makes a whole story out of he and his family listening to Chumbawamba off of a tape recorder, which immediately does not sound like a very appealing thing, but just the way he tells it is so enigmatic and charismatic. And I love the dinner table scene, just for his presentation of that. I love the relationship between him and his wife in the movie, where they just don't talk to each other, but it doesn't feel like mean-spirited at all, or like their relationship is falling apart. They just don't talk to each other for some reason.
I was going to say that, Zach. Dang it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I love the thing that really gets the concert going is his kind of opening speech where he has his hands hiked up into his armpits, and he's talking about how God made Texas, which I don't care about, but the way he tells it, I'm fascinated. How did God make Texas? Why is the ground so hard like concrete there? And it gets the concert off on a really great note where I'm immediately sucked back in, even though some of the preceding scenes throughout the 90 minutes might have had me a little bored. I'm right back into it with the armpit monologue.
Yeah, apparently the armpit stuff and the hand movements were that David Byrne noticed that when people are giving speeches, they give hand movements that you would never give in normal conversation, but in a speech it makes sense. And so he told Spalding Gray, like, you should just do like insane hand movements that like would make no sense in any context, but they just found it funny of like that people in speeches are always like doing like these things that would just be very bizarre in normal conversation.
Cycling back to the not speaking to his wife thing, I also like how that functions as like an extrapolation of the "go ask your mother" thing, to the most extreme extent, where the children basically function as messengers between the two parents rather than like their own. Like there's no, until I guess the monologue, there isn't really any impression of the relationship that the children have with their parents. Certainly not as individual parents, and but yet that still somehow survives the what we've said before about Byrne, which is that there's like zero vitriol or judgment in the way that he presents these things somehow. I think that's probably an even more impressive example of that than the like oddball nature of John Goodman's TV commercial, because like that would almost like suggest like some to some extent like an emotionally absent parent, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, the presentation of that is really clever, I think.
Well, it's just such a great joke of like when John Goodman's like, they haven't talked to each other for 10 years. And then when they're having dinner, it's true they haven't talked to each other, but they're completely respectful and are interested in each other's lives. And it's just like, was it just that they got in a huge fight 10 years ago and they've since resolved it, but are still unwilling to talk to each other? Or maybe they found out that they actually just enjoy life more not talking to each other.
And that definitely feels like that's, I think, one of the most believable, like, tabloid headlines, like, subjects of the movie. I haven't talked to my wife in 15 years, but we still live together, question mark. Alrighty. Well, I guess we can move along then to our closing segment of the show. We are going to move on from our main discussion on true stories to the rundown.
I'm gonna drive Christian down with my mini Mustang.
I can't meander like this white dress girl. I gotta
go. Your Mustang, which is not a rental car, it's personally owned.
Right.
Yeah, we've been doing this segment since season 1. This was our earliest additional segment we added to the show. Christian has a minute to rate as many individual things from the movie as he can out of 5. And Tyler, Mitchell, and I will be slinging the things at him in a list. Mitchell, what order are we going to go in for the rundown?
Me, Tyler, and Zach.
Okie doke. Well, let me pull up my minute timer.
It's getting real.
And move my Skype tab and open my texts.
Not
really seeing how the sausage is made here, folks.
Yeah.
All kinds of meats.
Are we all ready to go?
Yes. Ready spaghetti.
Okie doke. We begin in 3, 2, 1, start.
Dinosaurs.
3 out of 5.
The Ken Burns effect.
3 out of 5.
Virgil, Texas.
3 out of 5.
Real fancy driving.
4 out of 5.
Steve Jobs said that.
3 out of 5.
A cool multi-purpose shape.
4 out of 5.
Some kids.
4 out of 5.
The clean room.
3 out of 5.
844 wife.
4 out of 5.
Dirt roads.
3 out of 5.
Twins.
3 out of 5.
Vericorp.
3 out of 5.
Shopping mall.
2 out of 5.
The dancing bear.
4 out of 5.
Lip sync karaoke.
3 out of 5.
A consistent panda bear shape.
4 out of 5.
There's no concept of weekends anymore.
2 out of 5.
Awful sad songs.
3 out of 5.
Lying on the floor.
3 out of 5.
Spalding Gray.
4 out of 5.
Pad o' butter.
3 out of 5.
Halt.
Oh.
Wow.
All right.
Wow. Tyler got some good ones in there.
Yeah, let's crown Tyler with the best rundown delivery of all time. That was the sauce right there.
A thing that I didn't want to forget to mention is when John Goodman says when he first goes like, "Grr, how a dancing bear!" I'm like, his roar, it like scares you.
Yes,
and it's just so good.
10
It's
Cloverfield Lane
Sully
PTSD.
Sully.
Oh, or Sully, yes.
Yeah. So, all right, since this is our final film discussion episode of the season, We've done a rundown every episode this season, and for viewers new to the concept of our season finales, next time there will be a rundown again, but we'll be combining all the terms that we didn't get to in previous rundowns into
If
one
I can find them.
mega rundown for season 4.
Yeah.
So with that, we're coming to the end of our episode on true stories. Tyler, thank you again for being here. Anything that you'd like to plug before you go?
No.
Tyler, woo!
Okay, everybody, a round of applause for Tyler.
Yay, thank you for being on.
Alrighty, then without further ado, I guess we'll wrap this up. Nothing to preview this time, but come back next week because there will be a season finale. But until then, we bid you adieu. Thank you again, Tyler, and good night, everybody.